Hi, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well today. Hit loud mics for folks. Okay, welcome to the developer user group for November. We've got a pretty exciting lineup kind of scheduled for you guys today to go through for process flows. We're going to be starting at something that's kind of basic for process flows. We're going to be going through some basic patterns and usages that are pretty powerful when put into practice. And then we're going to be going through some very use case specific examples for process flows. And then we're going to end up at a community roundtable to talk about kind of current news in Plex involving developers, as well as we want to hear from you guys of what things you're working on, what type of questions you want to have answered by the community here, as we've got a pretty deep pool of knowledge to pull from either all the attendees or any of the panelists. Okay. So like I said, we're gonna be going through some of the basic patterns. I'm gonna take you through through this morning, first out of the gate. Then we're gonna have Jennifer McIntosh take us through like data source identification, which I find is sometimes harder than wrapping that data source into the flow is finding the exact data source you want to use. We're gonna have a break at 10. And he's gonna take us through amortized tooling, pricing notification. I've got a real world um, process flow for operation and inventory, kind of maintenance for cleanup after a transformation. And like I said, we're going to do the community roundtable. If this is your first developer user group meeting, um, just know that the content we're going to go to is really for you. It is generated by you. So if you want to hear additional content that is very specific, that's something you're struggling with, or a topic that is near and dear to your heart, please reach out. Like, your voice and your opinions really guide of what we do here at the developer user group. We want to make sure all the content that we're giving you is relevant, and you obviously are going to ingest it and have this time that we spend together really meaningful and impactful for you. Okay, so the first one I'm going to go through is process flows, the basics. I'm David Chupp. I'm the ERP development manager for Revolution Group. I've been in the Plex community since 2013. I've implemented 13 facilities live on Plex globally. I've done hundreds of integrations and applications with Plex. Okay. We're going to go through some cool patterns here. This is directly coming from the work that I've been doing with process flows with some of our customers for some really powerful patterns that you will reuse and reuse and reuse to get some really predictable results out of process flows, as well as have your process flows more maintainable over time, which is important. I'm sure we've all had process flows that we did something with, we came back maybe a couple months later and thought, what the heck did I do here? We're going to address some of that with formatting string messages, where it's going to make it really readable and understandable of what we're doing. Okay. The basics that I'm going to run us through is I'm going to take us through how to pull back a list of containers with a hold status. Okay. It's kind of a nonsensical use case, but it's pretty good to show. Pretty good to show some of the basics here. We're going to take that list of containers in a hold status. We're going to loop through the data. We're going to update container, or in our case, I actually put the suspect. And you can thank Copilot for all my all my chart images here. All right, just a second here.
Those look like what, nerdy dragonflies?
They are. I'm in my mind's eye. The dragonflies are wearing like spectacles on their
Yeah,
face.
that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking too. They look like nerdy dragonflies. I mean, I'm a nerd. That's in all,
Yeah. Yeah.
loving nerds.
Yeah. I'm a fan of the nerdy dragonflies. That's why when I saw it, sometimes um, PowerPoint recommends some weird slide things, but when I saw this one, I was like, yes,
That's perfect.
that slide one's for me. All right, sorry, nerdy dragonflies, you're gonna get covered up here a little bit. All right, so the first thing I want to do here for our example, we were going to get back a list of containers in a hold status. So I'm going to, you see every time you see like one of these output nubs, outputs are on the right, inputs are on the left. I'm just going to drag this off here into the white background space here. And I'm going to say in here, data source. Data sources are how we get, update, delete, add data. And I want a data source that we can search containers by. So I know that I want containers, and I want this to be get. I also want this to be global allow, self-serviceable, and I want to be able to give it a container status. And spelling is a requirement to type in the field here. Okay. We've got a couple options here for container statuses. Are for containers that have container statuses coming back. I'm going to select this containers get to RE just because I've used this one in the past a whole bunch and I know that it works well for a use case. I click into here, I can see I can look on containers that are with a container status. It returns me back a serial number, which is pretty important. The status. Oh, and as I go along through here, feel free to kind of raise your hand in the chat and ask questions. Like, not meant to be a webinar where we're just speaking off into outer space. If you got a question, please ask it as we go along here. Okay, so I can see I have the serial number here. That's pretty good. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to my flow here, and I know I'm gonna use, and I did not copy the name. Here, copy that off. I'm gonna paste that into there. And I want to look on active containers because there's no point of doing something that is not an active container for our use case. I've got container status here. And I'm going to mention before on the right, it's outputs, left are inputs. I'm going to drag off my input. If I hit this little anchor, that means it's going to anchor this right inside of this node here. I'm going to show it to you what it looks like without it being anchored first, and then I'll show you how to manually anchor it. So I chose to not have that anchored, and it created what's called a literal node. This allows you to put like static values or like set points into your data sources. For active, you see this is green here on the input nub. I'm going to put a 1 here, 1 being active, 0 being inactive. And then if I wanted to collapse this up into here, like into this container, I can just drag it into there. It's a little bit cleaner to see. You can see this says active. I can also undock it by dragging the little green ball, drop it off.
Is there a limit to the number of times you can do that?
How many hours you guys got?
So you can just keep nesting and nesting and nesting. It doesn't.
Oh yeah, there is a limit. It's somewhere near like 15 items or so.
Okay.
I've only hit it a couple of times. You don't naturally want to nest it that much because it becomes harder and harder to read.
Right.
To me, I prioritize readability over having your flow be as horizontally small as possible. It's better to be able to read it and maintain it versus to come into it and say, what the heck did I do here? Okay. The next I'm going to put into here is container status. I'm going to put hold into here. Just going to drag those off. You can see that's still very readable about what I'm doing here. And then I'm going to come in here to go stop, just because I want to see if something comes back for this data source here or not. Always, always, always test on your, at least on your first data source, that it's returning the data you think it's going to return. The further you go out to the right without this testing, it basically makes everything to the right suspect, and maybe you could be building up nodes that you never use and you need to recreate and kind of blow it away and start over if this did not work. I'm going to call this one Doug, which is developer user group. Save here. And I want to show you this. So if I hit run here, it's a little confusing the first time you run into this. So if I hit run, awesome. So the flow ran. You click into here, you click, man, I don't have anything in the output here. Well, process flows ignores data that you don't use. So a really easy way that you can test this would be to click onto this stop, and let's add a flow output. I'm going to say integer, add output, and I'm going to call this count of rows. And well, we should probably count some rows. Count rows. List count. Oops. I'm going to drag this into here. And then I'm going to hit run here. Okay, so I'm expecting a different result here from when I click onto this data source object. Click onto here now. See, it's up. We have 93 items now that have returned from this list. And I'm not really doing anything crazy with this to be able to see the data. I'm just putting a placeholder count object here. Not even doing anything with the count of rows here. And I just want something to happen to this rows here. So process flows returns plus our data coming back here. You'll notice, I don't know if you can notice my computer is going a little slow. When process flows has the run data, it stores that run data in your local browser. So after you're done looking at the flow run, hit the stop button. That makes your browser run a lot more performant, and you can have kind of better confidence that it's not going to freeze over time. As you keep running bigger and bigger flows, you'll have more and more data loaded to the browser. And then when you start dragging content around, it could cause your browser to freeze. And I found that if you just stop it, it resolves that performance issue where you don't have to have your browser freeze up on you. Okay, so if I go back to my example here, what were we trying to do? We got a list of containers on hold status. Awesome. So now we're going to want to loop through this data here. Okay. I'm going to just take off my stop from the end here. We're not really going to use that here yet, but we are going to want to have a stop. I'm going to delete my list count here, and I'm going to go into my containers and off. So I mentioned, so let me step back a little bit. So I mentioned we had outputs and we had inputs. So this top level here, this dark, kind of looks black. That's a really dark, would it be a navy blue? This navy blue is your logic path. This is the path that the process flow is going to follow. Anything below that is not that dark blue, think of it as your data path. Your data path sometimes executes at different times, and it doesn't always line up with your exact logic path here. So if I had let me just do this, show an example here. Okay, so here's my example here. I'm going to have them, I mean, they're all going to go to stop here. This is simple. Stop. Okay. I'm going to do, should say not equal 0. Okay. So I want to run this, and what I'm expecting to happen, so you can see here, I have this data, I have this if statement, and then I have this over here. Okay. What's going to happen here is, because this if statement is connected to this very next logic statement, we'll see this list count run, then we'll see the compare run, and then we'll see this if. Okay, and then after it, I'm expecting, which we may want to do something a little redundant here. List count, just to make it very clear here. You can see this red here. This red says I'm connected and I'm not doing anything. And really, really wants to be connected so that if you do an operation, you actually use something with the operation. Okay, save here, and I'm going to hit run here. Okay. So I'm going to step through here with the properties. And the next thing it's going to do is, well, because I have this next if statement, it's going to execute everything in this data flow, which we have logic flow, the data flow. It's going to execute everything in the data flow to come up with a result in our logic flow here. And then you see here, this was after the if, but it was directly connected to the containers. It executes this list object and then goes to the stop. This is really important to know that the order of execution for these data objects happens as the logic path necessitates it to happen, or when it naturally needs to happen. Okay. I'm gonna delete all these off here. We don't need these. Okay. So next thing I wanna do here is I wanna loop through my containers here. And again, I just drug off this object here. Type loop into here. And notice in here that this loop, and since I drug it off the main logic path, it connected to the logic path. But I could have drug it off of the rows here. And I could have selected a loop also. As you can see, it connected the rows to the list, but then it didn't have the logic path selected. So you could potentially use this at a later point down the road here. If you want to loop, if you wanted to. Put rows here, rows to the list, because we're going to be going through a list of rows. And then when I connect this rows up to here, this little embedded field will show me all of the options that I have inside of the data coming back from this data source here. For our use case, we really want to just have the serial number here. Okay. And then this is a little different now. We have two logic flows here. We have a done and we have an each. Well, dones, for the first done, you could have multiple loops here. The first done, you want to have this stop on there generally. I mean, you can have other things off of there, but it's very important to note that the majority of the flows you're going to have are going to have a stop off of the done, and you're only going to have one stop in your flow. Promise you, the first couple flows that you make, if you have more than one stop, it's going to be really confusing, as you're going to come to a point of it where you only processed one record. Like if I had a stop off of this each, it would process the first record and just quit. And you'd never get to like the next item. Okay, so I now want to take each serial number we had coming off of here. Just want to direct that into there. And I want to do something with it. Well, let's go to update our container. There's a really great data source for containers. It's container simple. I think it's update. Yep, update simple. The reason I say it's great is it has like history baked into the data source. Not all data sources have history of the change baked into them, which we'll show you here in a little bit how to add history to any data source. At least any history to any process flow, I should say. Okay. The first thing it asks me is, well, and these are red because they're required fields. It wants to have a last action. Well, I'm going to put into here. It's that hopping that so far over. Let's say updated 5 process flows. And that'll be on the last action of the serial number. Connect the serial number into there. And I would have updated the serial number here. And I'm going to say next, or loop next. And that's important to say loop next here. You could also say loop exit. Loop next tells this main loop object, I am done with this each. Let's go on to the next item in the list and do the same thing. Okay. I'll click save here. I'm going to click run. And I actually didn't do anything here. We just put a last action. Keep in mind, like when you have your spinning gears, that's when process flow is running. When it's actually showing you the results, the process flow is already done. You can just click stop. All right, let's actually update the status here. The literal here, and I'm going to put suspect here, save, and let me validate that the correct container status in our PC. Good. All right, I'm going to run this again, this time for real. Probably one of the most important things that you should take away from this basics. I'm in test, oh goodness, I'm in test developing this, so you should be also when you're developing it. Just because, right? If you are doing this inside of production from development, you can very easily update records you should not be in production. The typical flow is you develop it in test, you export and import it to save it into production. And then you do all your continued testing, like the next day when you're done in test. And then you only check it in, really in production, when you have tested it and really validated it inside of the test environment. I'm going to click stop here, and I want to take a look at one of these serial numbers here. Oops. We have maybe there's a serial number here. Okay, so I have this tube part number here. Oh, look at that. Updated by process flows. You can see the container status was suspect. And if I go into the container history here, we have suspect. And it was updated by process flows. Awesome.
Nice that it's in the revision history like that.
Yeah, not every data source does that.
No, that's really great. Oh, not every
Yes.
data source does that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, gotcha. So what does it say for last action if the data source doesn't do that?
Nothing. Won't show you. Won't
Oh,
even show any change log or history.
oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Okay,
Which
so you just
I'll
kind
show you.
of keep a lookout for that.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking like on audit, how do you explain it? Show them the process flow and say that's what's doing it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I've got it. I've got it in the agenda how to show you how to add history so you can pass
Okay.
an audit.
Okay, great.
Especially if you're adjusting like invoices or something, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
that is something you want to have changelog for. Okay, so the one thing I want to show you here now, so we just updated a bunch of transactions, and right, there is a potential, like I just mentioned, invoices. We did a project earlier this year for creating new invoices, new invoice lines for some really complicated prepayment system for suppliers that allowed you to pay ahead of time, where it created AP invoices, and then on the receipts, it applied that prepayment to the prepayment receipt, made an offset line from the prepayment account, updated the actual cost of the containers on the receipt, and that would have been very bad if that processed receipts more than one time, because it would have had the receipt credit applied more than one time. So one of the patterns that I find extremely useful, when you want to process the transaction one time, and for whatever reason your data source doesn't filter out that you've already processed this transaction, these are sometimes called like once fired patterns. I'm borrowing from like a event-based systems here for the name of it, but really a once fired is you process a record on transaction one time. Doesn't matter how many times you try to process it, happens one time. And you use this when you can't distinguish if you've adjusted something already. And if you adjust it, it is not a good thing if you adjust it twice, because then you'd be causing errors by touching it twice. And the once fired makes it so that you have some type of a safeguard, so you do not touch that record twice. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna stick to my slides here. Pretty sure I'm gonna run out of time if I take you through this on the screen. All right, so the once fired pattern relies on custom fields. Okay, so on my example here, I've got a container. I'm calling it once fired, but I would recommend that you call it something that is relevant to the transaction that you're performing on it. You could have more than one once fired on an object, and you don't necessarily want to call it once fired. This one's pretty simple, just call it once fired. I like the type of Boolean here, just so it's true, false. Have I processed it? Yes, no, type of thing. And I'm showing the actions here. I have these checked here. Not because I think that you should have them checked necessarily for once fireds. I usually recommend once fireds to be completely hidden so that you cannot see it on the user interface, because it doesn't really matter and could be bad if someone toggled it when it already had processed on the user interface. So I just have these marked here for like development and troubleshooting as you go through it to have these turned on. The recommendation is to have it turned off on at least the detail record so that you can't toggle it in production, where you get to have a record that gets inadvertently processed twice. Okay, so here is our process flow that looks pretty similar to one we just saw here for updating containers. The differences here, well, the first thing I'm doing for this serial number here is, well, I am looking up its custom fields for this object. Okay. When I look that up, I've got like two potential pathways of this custom field here, where it gets a little complicated on the once fired piece of things. I've got it broken down into like the individual paths here, but this is just overall, this is what that looks like. We have a path at the top here where we don't have any custom fields set. And then if we don't have any custom fields set to a container, well, your once fired sure didn't run before because you haven't set that to true that you fired it. So we can assume that we can use that container. And then if it is not null, well, then you can't really assume. Maybe you have another custom field there that you want to filter out on. So, this path has no custom fields existing for this container. I'm doing a check here. Is this field, list of fields, is it null or empty? If it is null or empty, then we're treating it as, let's update our container status. That's also, like, when we've updated it, we are going to mark that container as fired, or we've processed it, and then go on to the next item. And then once this is set, we'll never process this container again. Okay. Path 2, looks like I forgot to do an if statement here for the once fired, but path 2, if, oh yeah, here it is. If the once fired is true, see here, we have the field once fired coming from custom fields here. And then we have it set to false if it is blank. But if that is true, we've processed it, well, let's skip it by this next loop. And if it is not true, meaning we have not processed it, well, let's process it, mark it as processed, and move on to the next item in the loop. Just one moment. So this pattern works super well for processing records one time without processing it again. As I spoke before about the invoices, how that could cause major issues. Certainly it'll wrinkle some noses if you process an invoice twice when you should not. And using this custom field in this way is a really good way to lock a record so you cannot process it again. Okay. The next one I want to talk about, which I'm going to show you guys the next one I want to talk about is formatting string messages. I'm going to open up a process flow and kind of walk you through what a common trap is for formatting messages. So we're not going to have anything really fancy here on the process flow. We're going to have a start and a stop here with an output message of string message. Okay. One of the most common things, like when you're getting started, is, well, you have text from something else. If you're coming from like an Excel background, you're thinking, man, how I did this in Excel is I just concatenated values together. And that works pretty well in Excel if you don't look at the formula. But if I take this concatenated value here, I've got two values to add. I've got a string. Let's call this one job. Job no space. Let's do an underscore. And then I've got a job number. Let's call this that. That's a good job number. And then okay, I want to add more to this now. Well, let's do another concatenate. Let's do what work center is this? Okay, now I have that work center. I got to do another concatenate here. Well, what's work center? In our case, it'd be 100T for 100 ton. Okay, so we have job, we have work center. Okay, let's do another one. And let's say, what are we even trying to tell people? Well, we have message, maybe something like that. Well, what is our message? Well, we've got another concatenate. Let's call this one, let's say this is the machine's down. And I could go on until the cows come home from this, but just looking at this, and you'll very quickly see like why this is a bad idea to format messages like this. It works. I'll give you that, it works. But can you tell what this message is supposed to be telling us? Looking at this quickly? I can't. um, it's very, very hard to read. Functional, yes. But very, very hard to read, very, very hard to maintain. What I'm going to propose as a better alternative here, which I'm going to delete all that's here. Okay. I'm going to do a string replace here. So I've got I've got an example message here that I want to use for us here. So we've got a string here of hello user group. This is an example message for date. And I expect this to look like this. Hello developing user group. This example message for 11/6/26. If you're coming from a programming background, like the method I'm going to show you is how to do string interpolation in process flows. It's the best way to have messages formatted that are readable, something that you can come back to over time. And I saw a question from Saram, is it possible to trim or take the first or last character of the string? There is not a way to do that. There's not there's not a lot of the string values there to take like gosh, I'm blanking on the name, either the first 5 or the name where you pick the how far from the ends you're at. There's not a good way to do that in process flows. I need regex. You could either do that too. So all right, so I'm going to copy. Let me see if I can operate Excel here. I copy this string off here. And let's pull up our process flows again here. Okay. So what I propose, instead of doing the big long chain of unreadable messages, the best practice here to show you is something that you can look at from the stringwise, and you can read this and say, okay, I generally know what this is telling me here. I can see it says hello user group. It's an example message for date. Cool. Just having that doesn't really do us anything though. That's just setting up our message template. What I'm going to do instead of the concatenate is replace text. It's a little, it's a little like node probably intensive here, but just put this here, user group. But you can very clearly see what I'm doing. You can see the string here of the message. I'm finding user group, and then I'm going to come into here and say Flex development user group. Awesome. And I think you can read that what's happening. We're taking this first message here, user group. We're going to go to the next replace text here, and we're going to just dragging that off of there. And we're going to find our next kind of tokenized word here that we're going to replace. So I have date here. We're going to find date here. And then We're going to replace it with what? Well, we probably should replace it with today's date. I'm going to take now, which is our today's date and time. And for time's sake, we're going to get a pretty UTC date format. I'm going to take this from a now and put this to text here. And then put that into the replace and put that there. I know that's a lot. I clean this up a little bit. It's easier to read here. You can even like dock this inside of here, which I don't know if that's, I don't really like that. Kind of hard to read. Oops. But you can very clearly see what this message is supposed to be off of this first message string. And then based on the finds, you can see all of the logic that went into, well, how do we deal with the user group? Well, here's the user group. Here's the date. So it allows you to have something that's very maintainable. And if you come back to this in a couple months, you're going to be able to read this. Okay. Now, if I run this, that was a little fast. Let me restart that again. So I run this, you can see how it's kind of going through here, going through each option. It's replacing the text like one step at a time, and then it outputs what our message could be. This is what I recommend for all messages you want to put into a comment or into the revision log that we're going to talk about next. But like I said, this is a very maintainable and powerful way to do comments, emails. That is more than just working the day of, but you can come back to and add additional things to it that would be very hard to do within inside of the string concatenate. Okay. Okay, so the next piece we're going to go through is adding history. So we can add history to any object in a record, but not all, like I mentioned before, not all data sources have history. But really all process flows can have history for all changes. Okay, there is a data source here that I want you to remember. It's this module revision API add. This allows you to add history to just about every green book or revision log inside of Plex. Okay. I'm going to go in through this here, and there's some special formatting of this data source here for the revision log. Really important to note this, specifically if you want to have some really nice looking revision logs. In the example here, we have field name 1, value 1, and that the little upper right there, we have a pipe and another pipe. That is delimiting the values. Okay.
What was the ID of that data source?
Yeah.
Thank you.
But anyways, like you delimit with that pipe, and then the original text and the revision text must match that same field name pairs, and they both must end with that pipe. I think I have in here. Okay. So here's me wiring this up to, I think I added this to a part, which I'll show you here how to look up the cloud action or application key. The identity key, so I added a revision to a part here. Identity key was the part key. The revision text, I just put in here example text here. And then I've got here some examples of what that revision looks like. So the first one here, the example text, so I didn't have the field name in there. So it said no field name, but I had example revision text. I didn't have an original value in there. The second one, which let me see if I saved that to show you the. I think I did. Yeah. Second one I have, field banana phone. All right, so the field banana phone, I put into here banana phone, example revision text, pipe. That went into the revision text. I did the same thing here for banana phone, example original text, pipe. Doing that allows the fields to show up properly in the revision log. So I know if you're part of the LA4 process flows, is like one of the, for some folks that are like in a publicly traded company, kind of a hard stopping point for process flows without writing revision to the record, having this exact data source, come back to it, this exact data source here, you can add revisions to anything. Even if you want to use the revision log to add like a processing note to it. Okay. The hardest thing about using the revision log is this cloud application key. So I want to show you how I figured this out. I'm going to go into our parts screen here. I'm going to go to my part number that I updated with Banana Phone. Revision log, you can see here, there's a Banana Phone. And if I'm on this screen right here, how do you know the application name? Well, there's two ways to do this. I'm going to show you the first way, which is a little bit of a pain, but it's pretty easy to do. Easiest to do. You go into inspect of the browser, and then one of these script tags, yep, looks like click the right one. It has the application name in here. Not sure if this is the right one. That application
You're trying to make me go cross-eyed. You're doing a really good job.
Yeah, so you can find it in here. Admittedly, that stinks, and I usually pick the wrong one when I do that. I have an extension that it's free to use, except for like if you want to log in and use some of the data magic features of it. But one of the things you can do without logging in are these setting tabs here. It's available at the Chrome store, Data Magic. If I click into the settings, we have two banners to show. We have URL, which shows you some of the parameterized stuff clearly, which I'll turn both these on so you can see it. So we have the app path, which is coming from the URL really. And then we have the Plex application, which I did all the hard work of finding all of that data here. Rather do it one time versus have to do it every time I want to find the app key. But it tells us helpful things like, here's the database you're on, here's your user number, your email, and more importantly, here's your app key that you can use to look up this revision quickly on. It tells you exactly this 203 here, which is the one that I used in here, which allowed me to hit this on the first try to the part revision log here. And if I go to any record inside of Plex, if I go to, let's go to oops, accounts. And if I can type here accounts, Today, account receivable invoice here. I go to here. You can see here, even at the AR side, like you can see the app key within a couple seconds here. And then when you're done, just turn it off because it's kind of cluttering the screen. You don't really need to see it all the time. Okay. So common mistakes that I see with process flows that hopefully hearing this will keep you from experiencing it as much as I have because I forget about it when enough time goes by. Is that the max loop depth is 3 on a process flow. You cannot chain more than 3 loops together off of the each. So as soon as you hit 4 or greater, which I usually find when I'm at loop 4 or 5, that you can't have anything greater than a depth of 3, which stinks. So knowing that, hopefully you can better plan your process flow if you need to adjust some records off of there to avoid the 3. And then the other major thing that I see all the time is that you have more than one stop node in your flow, and it causes your process flow to stop and process one, and usually it manifests itself by processing one record. And I mean, process flow did an error. It did what he told it to do, to stop at the first record. At this point, Saram, you cannot trigger another process flow from another process flow. For like a child flow, that would be incredible to do that, but at this point you cannot. Okay. Look at that, JMac ending on time.
Wow, too much pressure.
Questions of anything we covered today that want me to go over again, or anything that you see as a good use case for process flows?
I get a lot of requests for notify me when type of things. The latest one that I'm currently working on, basically learning process flows from this use case. We have a request for an email to be sent out to a specific group or person when trucks are late.
Yeah.
So I'm using the get trucks data source, and then we have to find out what time they arrived versus what time they were scheduled to arrive. And then everybody who is late outside that hour window, there's a report that goes out. I haven't finished it yet, so I don't know the frequency yet. I don't know if it's going to be hourly or half hour or how that's going to work, but that's the current use case that we have.
I would look at it like, I'd encourage you to do this, like that once fired pattern I showed you. Use a time on it though, instead of it being a Boolean value. Just to say, I mean, I don't know what the right time is here for a notification, but you probably don't want it to send out the same notification for the same truck that's late going out.
Yes.
Say if you run every 15 minutes, you probably don't want to do that. Maybe you want to have it check and say, well, did I run this within like a half hour ago? If so, let's continue on and skip.
Got it.
That's probably a good way to prevent you just from like showering folks with emails.
Yeah. Yeah, I only want it to send out if there were late trucks.
Yeah. Yeah, Tammy?
I just wanted to make a comment on Saram's comment about asking about process flows from another process flow. You get stuck in having too many loops, sometimes throwing that data on a custom field within the parameters that you're using, and then stack your schedule so that you can go back to that data and continue on from there. Custom fields do not have to be visible to the world, on a screen or anything, but they can be used to store data. And I believe that there are custom objects coming to process flows fairly soon. I think they're working out the kinks and the bugs with that, but something to keep your eye on. So if you need something right away, use custom fields and maybe stack your schedule. Do 2 process flows in a row back to back. Just as
Yeah,
a thought.
Good tip.
yeah,
Yep.
that's a really good outbox pattern, Tammy.
If you're going to use those, they don't show up in the, at least the last time I checked, they did not show up in the revision logs. Changes to
Mm.
those custom fields.
No.
So perhaps your idea of pushing entries is, did I hear that earlier, David?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Pushing some entries in there. That's a fascinating concept. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yep,
so
if you
glad
get,
that
if
you
you miss
record
that data
these and
source
share
key,
these.
it's
Yes.
this one right here.
Yes, I did hear that. Sorry, I was getting a call.
Okay, that's time for me. Next up to bat is data source
Yay.
identification, testing, and searching with very own Jennifer
Hi,
McIntosh.
everybody. If anybody needs like to stand up or anything, I know it's been an hour. I just stood up at my standing desk because I was sitting too long. So let me get my presentation going here. I'm gonna do slideshow. So I am gonna be bouncing between some screens. I'm gonna be kind of like David. I do have a presentation, but I'm gonna be going into Plex and Postman and trying to show some things live. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I am calling this presentation Data Sources 99 because I feel like it's before you can go, like kind of back in college when you had, you had to take pre-algebra because you weren't good enough to go into algebra. So that's how I think of this because I feel like I'm very, very much a rookie newbie when it comes to data sources in general. So, and that's a good segue into the intro. I'm going to go through a little intro about me, some prerequisites, a use case, some research. We're going to actually do a post and then some Q&A. So another reason I'm calling this the 99 class. So my background is not information technology. My degree is mechanical engineering, engineering mechanics. I spent a lot of time on the plant floor right out of college as a manufacturing engineer, program engineer, etc. Putting out the fires, wearing all the multiple hats. And I ended up working for a company that used Plex as their ERP back in around 2008 or so, 9, I can't remember. And then after a few years, I kind of became a Plex power user and segued into a Plex administrator type of role. And that's pretty much what I do now at Fisher Dynamics, mostly work with Plex. But a few years ago, I had the opportunity to work on, maybe more like 6 years ago, I got the opportunity to work on an interface project, and I needed to learn a little bit more about data sources. And fortunately, I had a supervisor that kind of gently pushed me out of my comfort zone and helped me learn this. And I'm very thankful for it because I definitely have a lot better understanding, even though it's a basic understanding. At least I can kind of bridge that gap and communication between developers and requesters. So with that being said, I like to say I know enough to be dangerous, but I also know enough not to be dangerous, if that makes sense. I know to post into the test database and not do things that could disrupt our business. So I'm going to start with talking about a little bit of prerequisite setup. We do have to request web service credentials from Plex via a support case. As far as I know, that's still normal practice. I know a lot of things change. So if something has changed that I have on here, David, Tamara, Heidi, anybody, just please let me know. But when I started all of this, for example, we didn't have self-serviceable data sources, so I always had to request them from Plex. So the first thing that has to happen is a web service credential needs to be requested from Plex. It's always a standard format. It can change a little bit if you have a specific project, but in general, it's usually your company, like PCN and location, and then they always put a WS for web services at plex.com. I'm only noting that because when I first requested my first credentials, I told them what I wanted, and they were like, no, that's not how it works. And then sometimes you do want them per PCN, but sometimes you also want them per function. Like I said, maybe it's specific for Mach 2 or specific to an interface with ADP or SAP or something like that. An example request I put here to send a case to Plex would be that, you know, you're starting a machine integration project, you need web service credentials for XYZ PCN. Once you have web service credentials, what I use is Postman. It's a free download. I've provided the link in the PowerPoint presentation here. And I do believe in one of my sessions, you can see that on top of my PowerPoint presentation. This is what it looks like. You can sign up for free, create an account. I also provided a link to a community knowledge article about how to use Postman. And I also provided some more details on the last 3 slides that I'll cover at the very, very end. But I already have all of these prerequisites set up for this demonstration today. So the use case that I'm going to use is what I talked about earlier. I've actually done this one about 3 times with different PLMs to Plex. And this is actually, I'm using this use case specifically because this is the use case that got me out of my comfort zone and helped me learn the power of a data source. And it'll also help me start to ask questions like, what is a data source? What is an API? What's a REST API? That was all Greek to me. So with that being said, the first thing I had to learn was, you know, data sources. What are they? How do I find them? Which one do I use? In Plex, there is a screen called data sources. And that's where we're going to go to look for what we think we want. Once we go in here, you're going to see we can filter by specific things that originally I didn't understand, because you come across things like this. Let's say you want to start super duper basic. I don't know what data sources is. What do they do? So, and I wanted to not mess up production. So I was like, if I get something, I'm just getting information. I'm not posting anything. Plus I was taught to post to the test database or even get, which is my, I always do that, whether I'm getting something or not. I'm just over careful. So in this example, let's say we wanted to just get a list of all of our active parts. So what I would do, and I'm going to bounce over to Plex for a minute here. So I'm not really sure what I'm doing, but I know that I want to get parts. I'm pretty confident the database is going to be part. And I know that my output, I want to get parts, right? I want to get part numbers. Whoops. I want to get part numbers. I want to get a list of active part numbers. So I know my output is going to be part. Pretty sure my data, I know I want to get. I was going to put part in there, but I'm going to put get because I know I want to get data. I'm just going to search and see what I get. I got a lot. I got over 1,000 records, but I'm not going to give up. It's in alphabetical order. I'm going to go down to parts. Oh, look at that. There's some parts. Let's go to the top. Okay. So I want to get parts. So I'm gonna look for gets, and they're all gets because that's what I put in. I see a part attribute get. That's not what I want. I want parts. So then I come down here and I'm like, okay, I just want, oh, look, there's a part get. That's great. Oh, but there's another part get. Oh, well, there's another part get. Shoot, which one do I want? So then I start to look at them and I'm like, okay, well, this one has 220 outputs. This one only has 4. This one has 17. I'm not sure which one I want. I know I want parts. So I'm going to pick this first one. And there is this little details action here. I can click on it. And that's going to give me more details about that specific data source. It's looking promising so far. I have an output of, oh, wait, I don't have an output of part, do I? Let's look. Old part, part source, part type, part number. Okay, I've had part number, but what do I have to input? I have to input a part key, a part number, or a revision. That's not what I want. I want to put in, I want to filter by like maybe active and return parts. And that's not what this one is doing. So I'm going to try something different. I'm going to look at the next one. I wish it would return me to the parts, but it doesn't. So I'm going to try again. I'm going to say, okay, well, what about this part get to? Look at the details. I have to put in a part key. That's not what I want. I want to return parts. So then I start to think, well, maybe my output is parts, not part. So then I'm like, okay, let me go back down here. Is there parts maybe? I don't know. Oh, look, there are parts. Okay, so then I'm like, okay, oh, look, there's a parts get. Now I'm getting somewhere. So now I'm going to look at this one. And I'm going to say, is this, oh, look, there's active. I want an active input. Oh, and that would be cool if I could put in a status. Maybe I just want to see all my active parts that are in a production status. All right, so now I'm going to focus on this one. I'm going to note that I don't have anything required, but I only want active, so I'm pretty confident I at least want this one. I'm going to check my output data to make sure that my part number and revision is going to come through. That looks great. So this looks promising. I'm going to go ahead and look at a sample request. And this one, I have to show a little bit more to see the whole thing. So it's not huge. Something I learned just yesterday, David, you're going to be embarrassed. I used to copy this whole thing into Postman and then delete what I didn't want. Well, you can actually just uncheck these little boxes and they'll start to disappear. So I want to keep status because I'm gonna choose to filter production and active. I'm not going to put in a part number because that's what I want to return. I don't need any of these other things. I do want active and part status. So it's going to give me the sample text that I can copy. I'm going to pause and look at my presentation to make sure I'm on track. Okay, perfect. That's what I thought. I want to stop for 1 second and we are going to make sure that I have access, that my web service credentials that I requested from Plex has access to this data source. Thankfully, recently, Plex created an avenue for us to grant access to that data source to my web service account that Plex created for me, and I can do that myself. If you I clear these. I'm just showing that I do have access to it, but I want to show something. Where is the screen that's my self-serviceable screen? Thought it was this one.
What? It's webs. Yep, that is it. You just got to filter by the user account name.
I did that. Okay, so here you go. So there you can see whether or not it's self-serviceable. Or not. I thought there were some that were unchecked.
You can see it on the data sources screen as well. It shows
That's
you
the one I
self-serviceable.
was thinking of. Thank you. Yeah. So if they're self-serviceable, then you can come here and grant them per user account. That's what I did with this parts get so that we could use it today for a demo. So now I can go to my Postman and I just copied that sample request. And we're going to bounce around just a little bit here. Got another screen for you. So all I did here is pasted what I copied from the sample. How do I know what to put in here? First of all, they kind of give you a clue by populating it with a number or sample text. Because if we look here, it's going to tell us that active is a small integer. So that's going to lead me down the 1-0 path versus true false. And then my program status is characters. So I know that's telling me that here I can make an educated guess that this is active is going to be 1. And in our PCN, our status of production is actually just called production. So now, a couple of other things. My data source, my data source ID was 149. So this number is very important. We need to do a few things here in Postman. We need to make sure our URL, I always make sure my URL is pointing to test. Even if it's a get, honestly, I'm just overprotective and I always double check things and test before I do anything in production, especially if it's a post. Here you have to put that data source number, ID, in here. And then based on whether you want to post or get information, you can change that. You have to make sure the correct credentials are in here because we granted permission specifically for this one. So we have over a dozen PCNs. So this could be, I could have one of these credentials for every PCN. You got to make sure it's 1-to-1, whichever one you granted access to, that's the one we're testing. I'm going to use JSON and I'm going to just see if it works. I don't know yet if it's going to work. We're going to send it. And this, I learned recently, is because this method actually needs to be a post. My data source is a get. And maybe somebody who knows more about how to explain that can tell you, because I don't. I just know that I have to use a post. So now I'm like, okay, sweet. I got an okay result. The first section is just going to repeat what the header of the data is returning. You have to scroll down to see the row results. So each result is going to be a part number. It's just all those things. And then only active parts. So here's another part. And I just can keep going down. It just returned all active parts in this PCN that are in a status of production. So that's how I would test to make sure a data source that I think I want to use is the one that I want to use. If you don't have the ability to self-service that particular data source, that's when you would need to reach out to Plex to whitelist it. So grant you access, basically. In that case, if it's not self-serviceable, you would need, here's an example of a request that I would send in as a Plex case to get a data source whitelisted. Please whitelist the following data sources for your web service credentials. So it's not for you, it's for your web service credentials. And then you might have multiples. If it's something you need to do in multiple PCNs, you might be granting access to a data source for 6 different web service credentials. You want to make sure to include the data source name, the database, which is usually in parentheses, or you can create a separate line for the database, and then the ID number. The unfortunate thing, if it is not self-serviceable, in order to do what I just did in test to make sure it's the one you want, you first have to get it whitelisted. So in my part get example, I could have whitelisted all those part get data sources that I didn't really need if I didn't look at the inputs and the outputs prior to making that request. Since I did look at the inputs and the outputs prior, I would know to request parts get, not part get. And then I don't have data sources activated that I don't necessarily need or will ever use. Does that make sense? Does anybody, I'm going to pause for a minute because I'm going to go into another section where we're going to kind of do this a little bit live, but in test. Does anybody have questions? Feedback, David, Tamron, is there anything I've missed so far, specifically with data sources and research?
I kind of have a question about whitelisting.
Okay.
I've had a heck of a time getting them to whitelist stuff for process flows or for VisionPlex.
Okay.
Is that just traditionally a hard thing that
No.
they just reject?
No. What's
So-
your example?
So they just hate me?
I don't know. David, have you ever been rejected to get a whitelisted?
I
data
guess
source?
the advice I'd give you, Amy, is don't mention process flows. Just say, I want this data source whitelisted for this web service credential.
I agree.
It was more actually for VisionPlex stuff. that I've
Okay,
had
the
problems
VisionPlex
with.
ones, they are very protective of those.
Okay.
Okay.
They generally let partners do that. But I mean, just because you could potentially have like thousands of executions of a data source that's caused by the VP screen with no guardrails. We had this just an example here. We were testing like one of the new VisionPlex things in LA, and there was an issue with the screen as there wasn't a guardrail for it, and we accidentally called data sources like 1,000 times for one data source.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's very, very, I guess there's not enough guardrails in VP for that to be exposed to customers carte blanche, but for web services or process flows, like they should,
Because they have the
whitelist.
guardrails up. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. They should whitelist that for you. And if you're asking for a specific one, they're just trusting that you know that, well, deletes things.
Yeah, no, I mean, mostly the ones I was rejected for were read only, but regardless. Okay. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was a good question. I learned something new too.
I recently found out too that if, as you're searching, like Jennifer's been doing, as you're searching through data sources and you're not finding inputs or outputs that you need, I put a case into Plex asking, how do I get to that data? Discovered that not all data sources are listed, that Plex has their own behind the scenes, of course, data sources that they're using for our programming that we don't have access to. And so I needed to request access to one of them that they were using that we did not have access to, and got that turned on through a case. So it has to go through development on their end, and they have to vet out that it's okay for us rookies to use it. And go that way. So just to know that all the data sources that are listed are not all the data sources.
Us rookies, you mean me, because you're definitely not a rookie.
Oh, no, I'm totally in the rookie department with, right here with you. Oh, no.
Okay, we'll learn from each other.
Yes, that's why we have our group.
Yes, I love it. Yeah, this was like a big eye opener for me. And it really helped me just go get a little bit better at all the things I do with Plex. Made things just connect better in my brain, if that makes any sense. And I could speak with somebody like David and not sound like a complete ignorant developer person.
I say it depends what we're talking about. Like I could be
Yes.
making
Oh,
like
thanks.
Stargate SG-1 references, and you'll give me like a blank
Oh,
stare.
yeah, no. Yeah, the deer in the headlights. I still have the deer in the headlights look every now and again, but at least you recognize it and you can back down and be like, okay, baby steps. Okay, with that being said, and everybody, please do not hesitate to interrupt me at any time as needed. Okay, so this is actually a good segue from what Tammy was talking about. I might have a feeling that this could be one of those like hidden things that Plex doesn't share, because in my use case of adding parts to from another system, from a PLM, Team Centers type thing, I had a heck of a time finding add part. So I'm going to go back to the data sources here for if I can find my screen. I've got 4 monitors right now, and I need to fix which one goes where. I don't need that anymore. I'm going to close it. We're going to go back to data sources. Okay, so back to our beautiful data sources. And this was actually a really good project because I had to go through this process quite a bit to find add a part. Without knowing what I was doing, I think I started here. I was like, I want to add a part. So I think I just put in part. And then I was like, well, I want to add. I'm like, I want to add a part. Add. There's no add part. I'm like, okay, to me, that seems like a pretty obvious one, but there's no add part. So I'm like, well, hold on. Maybe I'm pretty sure it should be part. So let me go to here. I'm like, okay, I want to add. There's no add part. Oh, answer operation add part. That's not what I want. Supply. No, that's not what I want. Bomb add part. No, I need a part before I can add a bomb. Capability run. No. Like there's no add part. There's just no add part. I went through it. Trust me on this one. So then I was like, I don't know. I didn't know what I was doing. So then I was just like, okay, maybe it's not add. So I'm just like, it's part. But there's, thousands of records. Like, okay, it's gotta be, so now there's 50. And I'm like, okay, this is a lot, but I know I want to add a part. So somewhere there's gotta be an add part. Oh, bomb add, we already covered that one. I'm gonna go down to part. I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get sick of this. This was like 6 years ago and it really did happen. So I'm going to go down to parts and I'm like, okay, there's got to be an add in here somewhere. I'm still not finding it. So I'm like, okay, there's no add anything. Try something different. All right, let's go to parts again. Part or parts. So I learned that lesson with the part get, right? We have part and parts. So I'm going to start with part because I don't know if it's in part or parts. So of course I'm showing this live and the one I want is not showing up. It's called part and attributes. Part underscore and. Why isn't it showing? We're gonna do it the easy way. So I don't know why that wasn't showing in the list. Because I very clearly was looking at part. But through trial and error, doing that same iteration with the part get that I did, I finally stumbled across this part and attributes add and update, but it did have the add in there. So when I looked at the details, I could see that there's one thing required, part number. Well, I want to add parts. That would make sense that I need the part number in there. What are my outputs? Okay, the part key. So this one looked promising. So I got it whitelisted. And before I knew to uncheck these things, I copied this entire thing. I copied the entire thing. And then I deleted everything except the part number because that's what I wanted to add. Now I know that I can actually uncheck these, right? Mass uncheck them and include just the part number, which I can't uncheck. So this is what I wanted. So I copy that. And note the ID of that data source is 18771. So in this case, I chose, oh, where did it go? So I'm going to put in a part number of 8675309. Because Jenny, I got your number. And I also want to decide, I've decided that I want to give it a part status when I add it. I want it to be 8675309, and I want it to be in a part status of prototype. But I always want to test it first because I'm going to be adding data into the system. So I'm going to show you over here. I'm in our corporate PCN parts. I'm typing in 8675. I'm going to click search. I'm just showing you that we do not have that part number in our system. Then we're going to go like this. And I'm going to post this, if I haven't said this 15 times already, to the test database because I don't want to post to production. I'm going to send it, see if it works. I got an okay result. I have a part key and a result code of active. I think that's what that is. But I want to see if it worked. So I'm going to come over here to my test database, see if we have a part number in there now. Look at that magic. This is where I just waved my magic wand. And you'll notice all the information I have is what I sent. My part number's in there with a part status of prototype. And that's it. So of course, once you test this, you could choose to use more fields to populate on that call or post. So we had a lot of options. All of these things, if I activate, if I want to include those, all of these things I can send to populate that part detail page whenever that interface happens. And this is the kind of thing I would send to whoever is going to be the developer for the project. I actually create like a spreadsheet with tabs, and each tab is a data source. And I put in each tab, I'll put in the ID, the data source name, I'll put in what are the input parameters, are they required or nullable? I will paste in the sample request. They think I'm amazing. They never get this data from, usually people put in a request and they're like, I want this to create magic. And they just want the developers to make that happen. But helping them like identify data sources and where that stuff is coming from makes that process go so much faster. That has been super helpful for me personally. But any of these things that I want to come through a description, maybe I want the engineer, any of this data I can have populated from my whatever Team Center in my case. If Team Center has the data, right? Usually it comes over and it's basic data, and then somebody gets notified to go through and do the rest of their process manually.
Looks like Billy had a question for you. So would
Billy,
you be
what's
willing to
happening?
share a sanitized version of that spreadsheet? He's working on an
Ooh.
ETL project. That'd be
If
helping
I
him figure out
still
data
have
sources.
it was at a previous job, so I will have to see if I still have it, but I could certainly recreate one super easy. Yeah, I mean, it was screenshots, like, but yes, who was that, Billy? Got you. Not a problem. If you could maybe put your email address in the chat or something, I can send it to you. All right, I want to go back and see where I'm at with my slides.
It's also, I can share this too here from.
Got it, Billy, thank you. And what's that?
Shared a screenshot of just data sources I usually use for adding these things too.
Gotcha. So again, I was thinking about what Tammy was saying. Does it make sense that there should be an add part data source that just isn't visible to us? I mean, this one
Yep.
did work, but I mean, it took me forever to find because I thought, why isn't there an add part?
Yeah, there is an add part data source in Classic. I can
Okay.
explain some of that. So there's a bigger list of data sources in Classic that did not come over to UX. First question is, well, David, why did they all come over to UX? Well,
Yeah.
they looked at the data sources and they put them in two buckets: safe, unsafe. Actively used by a lot of customers, not actively used by a lot of customers. So there are some data sources out there like that part add and attributes add update. It's kind of like a pool noodle, fun to use, hard to hurt yourself.
Yep.
And then there's other data sources that they did not migrate. One of the ones that comes to mind is like specification update. I think they migrated it my request a few years back, but it is a broken bottle and not a pool noodle. It's very easy to mess up your data. So they tried to have a lot of those data sources that did not migrate stay in UX, as they did not match like a modern experience how you'd want to use an API where it's hard to screw up data. There's some that exist out there that, quite frankly, they just weren't designed to be used with web services. They're primarily used in the application where they had perfect input every time. Some of the data sources that are in the broken bottle category is if you did not put in all of the required data, it would wipe out and potentially break records. So I'm guessing that part add that existed in Classic, and this is just speculation here, I'm guessing it had something in it that was not in that pool noodle category for them to bring it over.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, adding a part definitely is, I mean, everything we do is based on a part, basically.
Yeah.
So makes sense. But
Yeah,
this does the
also-
same thing.
I've also found in Postman as I'm testing data sources, where Jennifer showed what fields were required. In my testing, trying to find data sources, I found that isn't always a true statement either. So
Correct.
Postman will come back with an error saying data field that was required was not found. And I'm like, well, Plex didn't tell me that it was required. So keep an eye on that too. And like Jennifer said, test, test, test.
And
Yeah,
if you
true
do find
statement.
those for the required fields, please put a case in there. That helps us all out.
Okay.
The data source registrations, those
Mhm.
get entered in by hand.
I figured
So
as much. Yeah.
sometimes the requiredness of the data source did not get in on that form, and it would help us all out collectively. If you find those, please put a case in and say, hey, this either isn't the correct data type, it's not flagged correctly as required.
Okay.
That
Yeah. Yeah. And what I was finding is that the data source was exactly what I needed, but I did not have all of the inputs to put in there. I wanted to select, a broader scope and it wouldn't let me through Postman. So I'm like, well, that's great.
Yeah. I didn't know that, or I would have put in cases because I've definitely come across that multiple times.
yeah,
It doesn't say it's required, but it is.
that being said, even from like a couple years ago, by and large, a lot of those data sources in UX, a lot of those errors have been fleshed out. Remember in 2020, I kept running into a bunch that were migrated over from Classic incorrectly, and a lot of those have been resolved over the years, which is great. But any of that haven't been resolved, please, 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 please put a case in, just to help the next person out down the line.
Good advice. And it actually just popped into my head too that I was speaking with David a couple weeks ago and about this presentation and how I use Postman to test things. And he showed me a way, correct me if I'm wrong, was it process flows? You created a
Yeah.
process flow to test data sources. So this isn't just the only way to do it. There's other ways. I'm sure there's other software or whatever. I use Postman, but you don't have to. Maybe your admin or company won't let you download it. I don't know. Maybe David can share his process flow for that, but there is another way to do it.
Yeah, I
I
can
already,
show that what first part of my
oh,
next presentation how to do that too.
okay, great. These, and again, I kind of bounce between my presentation and Plex so that I had a presentation to share with the screenshots, but most of the things I've been doing live, this is just a slide showing the authorization that you have to have your web service credentials in here. And I added some screenshots to highlight, posting to test. Okay, number 16, I've said that. And that's where you put the data source, etc. And some screenshots of the input that I typed in and then the output result. And that magically it appeared in Plex. I used just 9 today in my demo, not 9.9. And prototype status. It was in test. I just cut off the banner that was yellow. And then I did say at the beginning that at the last few slides, I know when I very first tried to set up Postman, I had a couple of hiccups, like I couldn't get it to work, but I also did not know what I was doing. And I had a couple of colleagues that were able to help me. But I did put some stuff here and whoops, some common errors. So one of those I didn't put down, I got today. I think it was the 450, but basically it was the wrong post method. I get that one all the time if I try to get instead of post. And then you also can do this with APIs. I just have always learned to use the data sources. So that's just like my go-to, but I know there's also the APIs and the developer portal. Maybe that's a different, 99 class. And then
Which
go ahead.
say which this is coming to the process flows, hopefully by the end of the year for using developer portal APIs.
Okay. And this one is basically the one I use. So this is the data source. And this is kind of how I did it. I thought I had one more slide, but that is it. Anybody has any questions, feedback, pro tips?
And Postman, the URLs are different based on which type of API that you're using. Did you write any of those down, or do you have a way of sharing those?
Like this?
Yes, the cloud test.cloud.plex.com, and then there was another one that was Connect. I'm thinking
No.
the developer portal is different than the data
Yeah.
source. You know what I mean? The URLs are different.
I did not put that in my presentation, and no, I've always used, this is like my
Yep.
method of doing it. So I definitely would love to learn those other methods also.
Yeah, I'll share it in the chat here, the knowledge articles for this.
Okay, thank you. And since I did finish a little bit early, you could always do the process flow for testing data sources, since it kind of segues into the same topic. If that sounds okay.
Yeah. I would love to. You just
And if anybody does come up with a question, don't hesitate to ask me or put it in the chat. If I can't answer it, we have people here that can.
I put out those two links in the chat here, one for HTTP data sources and the second for the developer portal.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me show you guys my playground that Jennifer alluded to that I
Playground,
use.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I call it a playground, playground process flow. And it's a constant flux. I could even call it DC playground. So we did a little bit of this in the last, like when I was presenting here for how I test data sources often. Like if it's either I'm testing it with this because I don't have either the web service credentials, or I guess I'm just being lazy. But this is a really good way to test a data source out here. So I'm going to pick a random data source here. Let's pick the data sources. I'm going to select this global allow, which yes, self-serviceable is a yes. And then I want to, let's do something more with containers here. Let's go container. Maybe retire. That'd be probably a good one. So I have this data source here. You can see here it has inputs of 12, outputs of 0. I go into here, and you can test this in a couple different ways, right? You can test it with either Postman, which I do want to show you another URL method you can use with Postman that's a little bit nicer to look at than just the format 1 that came back, like format 2, which I'll show you here in a second. But here's like this container retire data source. It has adjustment key here, the container status. We have create adjustment here, some actual costing stuff, control panel, so on and so forth. So I'm going to take this data source here, and this is the main intent of this process flow is I'm just taking data sources that I want to test with and see if I actually want to use it on something. I'd rather have it as like a one-off data source that I want to use than and test it and validate that it works before I try to integrate it into a bigger process flow. So I'm going to put this one here, container retire. And then I'm going to select all these inputs here. Just so we can see. If you hit tab spacebar, it's a really good way to select all those things so you can see them. Same thing for the outputs and rows. I don't think there's anything here in the outputs or rows. I'm going to do a count on this anyways. Count there. don't know if there's anything here in the fields. I don't think there is now. Okay, I'm gonna click save here. I never check in this flow because I don't want anyone else to anyone else to run this, thinking that it's playgrounds are fun, but sometimes the playground could be testing a data source that deletes records, what have you. So I never check in. This is just my playground that I play with. So we have this container retire. So I guess
I want to make sure I
That's-
understood what you just said.
Yeah.
If it's not checked in, you can run it and it's not gonna do something.
it's more so I want to keep this checked out to me
Okay.
because I don't want anyone else to come into this playground or accidentally schedule it to run for whatever reason.
Gotcha.
It's meant to be always at version 0 because I'm never really committing anything. This is just me to test something.
Okay. Got it.
So we have this container retire here. So I probably need to give it a serial number. Let's do serial number here, do the literal. Probably need to have a serial number. Maybe that one. Oh, we should pick a different one. Let's pick one of these folds here. Okay. I'm going to do this serial number here. And I'm going to click into this thing here. And I'm going to push my serial number here. And right, if I just did this as a test, I mean, I can go in here and see what exactly happens. Like, is this going to run? Well, I can test it with just the serial number here. I am running this in production. We don't actually have inventory. Run that there. And I didn't return any results. We don't get any messages because this data source doesn't have any outputs or results. But if I update this, I can see my container here. Well, it got retired. Okay, I'm gonna reactivate this thing just so we can hit it again. But this would also, like, it'd return the same type of errors that we would have in Postman if we were missing a field. It would potentially say, hey, there was an error because we were missing something. I can come in here also and say, okay, I want an adjustment reason of this one. I know this is not a valid adjustment reason. Just want to show you like should return the same errors that you can see with Postman. You need to copy and paste this off there to read it, but it returned, hey, this data source had an issue. As expected, that adjustment reason key is not a valid adjustment reason key, and it says, hey, this failed because of this reason. So by pulling that data source out of here, putting it into a process flow where I'm like statically setting all the inputs, functionally does the same thing as Postman. Even returns like any errors that could potentially happen with this data source here. And then allows you to quickly test the data source. If you already have Postman, probably doesn't save you any time if you already have that set up. But if you don't have it set up, or if you don't have the web service key for whatever reason, this is a really great way to test that data source, like in isolation, where you just drag off like static values of what you want to go into the data source. Oops. I guess that's kind of it for testing it. It's really just pulling that up into its own thing, dragging off all static entry values into it, and then just running the data source, inspecting the result to this serial number here, and determining if you have all the inputs or not of the effect that you want to have on the data in there.
I love it.
Also, don't avert your eyes from this area here. This is coming out hopefully by the end of November for
Oh,
custom
yeah.
object support.
Limited availability, right?
Yeah. hmm Okay.
I
So
don't know. I
how?
feel like that's got some pros and cons, the LA. Like I like being involved in the beginning to help develop and like learn, but also it can be like sometimes I'm like, oh, let's just wait till everybody else works the bugs out and then I'll use it.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of exciting stuff coming out with like the LA piece of it, like actions, triggers coming out, the custom object support. Tammy brought up a really good point that I want to highlight on over a little bit more is that remember that AP prepayment application that I was talking about and like the receipt adjustments. I was doing that primarily with custom fields and creating like little, like call them decorators to objects to have another process flow pick up those objects and process. That right now with custom fields works extremely well when you have one record equals like one process that needs to run. I mean, think about like one receipt, one group of containers, or one invoice line. But if you have like more than one record that you should potentially kick off with that, the best place for that is not in custom fields, as there's not a good way to do that other than just explode out the number of custom fields that you potentially have on one record. It would be to create custom objects and use that as a kind of like a mailbox or like a post box that you can pick up and process those through with another process flow that has all of the transaction data it needs, like bundled up in that little envelope of the custom object record. You pick it up, process it, and then allows you to do really complex things in process flows without having to be done inside of one process flow. You can do it like in what's called an asynchronous pattern. Process some records, process flow could stop, and then another process flow picks up records that it needs to process, and then that one could create other records. It could have to process for another process flow, and it's just a really great way to split up some of that processing to other process flows to get around either the three loops or maybe max runtime of process flows, which I believe is 5 minutes. Okay, so that's a great segue to my favorite slide. We're gonna have some break time here.
Stretch your
10-minute break.
legs.
Meet you back here at 10:10.
I'm double booked for the next hour, but I will be back for the next one. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, hope everyone's back here. Next up is a process flow walkthrough of amortized tooling pricing notification. It's with Tammy Danner at PAX Machine Works. Take us away, Tammy.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen here. I get the right screen. Okay, do you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So our agenda for this segment, which will be very quick, and I welcome anybody who has any questions as we go along the way to please jump in and just ask them. We will have plenty of time. We'll go through the introduction, how I'm using custom fields, the process flow for how it is put together, and we will have time for questions. So here at PAX, we are a metal stamping facility. And we create our own tooling and service our own tools. And so in that process, being automotive, you know, they are planning way ahead into the future and usually don't have, you know, a quick turnaround. You know, we're processing parts now for 2027. So there's some length of time from the time that we get awarded a part to the time that the tool is built. We have prototypes that come off, and when they actually start production, there's quite a span of time. And so sometimes our customers like us to amortize their tooling across the piece price. And so we contract and agree on what quantity at what price that tooling cost would be recouped. And so when that's a manual process, you know that it's going to get missed. And all of a sudden the customer will say, I think we've met that quantity. Can you check on that? And then we end up issuing credit for an overage or something missite on our part. So to avoid that, when process flows came about, I'm like, this might be a good way of notifying our costing people to let them know that we've reached our limit on the number of parts that we have shipped and that we can get with the customer and get that price reduced. So that was the basic reason for having this available. So to do that, I needed to keep track of some data that was needed to be able to put this process flow together. So I added some custom fields to our parts, and that needed to know when this amortization began, basically for comparison sakes. Is this part number under amortization? Then I'd also wanted to know when it was completed. When was that quantity actually met? And then, of course, the quantity that was negotiated for that higher price. And then because I just wanted a flag, so I didn't have to compare the dates necessarily, I wanted a flag just to say I'm finished. And that is purely before the process, ease of the process flow. So to begin the flow, I wanted to get all of our parts that were manufactured because, you know, process flows, data sources have limitations on how many records they will pull. So I wanted to narrow down the active parts, first of all, and then I wanted the part type of manufactured because I didn't want any of our source materials. I didn't want quoted parts. I didn't want a lot of things so that I could keep it under the 1,000 of what it was that I needed to pull. I also only wanted to pull parts that we were able to ship. Here at PAX, we have split our stamping parts from the rest of the routing sequence because we schedule them differently. PAX looks at farther out for the stamping so that the setup times can be pushed and consolidated, and it makes it cheaper for us to run. But when we go through our secondary operations, burnish, the vibratory finishing and the staking and welding and some of the other things that we do those in smaller batch quantities. So what we decided early on is to split those up, and the parts that go through the stamping operation, and that is only the first operation, we tag packs in the back of that part number. It also lets our shipping department know that we can't ship those parts. Those parts are not shippable. We also do some multi-out parts, and PAX's rule for that is that there is a slash in the part number, that family part number, so that we know that it is a left-right part or it's a multi-out type part number. So in my process flow, I'm selecting manufactured as my part type to get an isolation there. I only want active parts. And then as I loop through those parts, I am selecting things that do not have the PAX in the part number and do not have the slash in the part number. Now I realize that you can use and ors and all these combinations of things, but this particular flow was one of my first ones. So I just kind of left it this way so that it would be easier to read, and just kind of simplified my life at the beginning as we began learning how to do process flows. So this section shows that, and it shows how it is looped through. The next section, I wanted to narrow down the data even further, in that I started to look at custom fields. So you'll see here, if the beginning date is empty or null, then I know that this particular part is not under amortization, and I loop to the next record. If I am finding a date, I'm looking to see if that checkbox has been checked. And if it is checked, then I know that it is amortized, but it has been completed. Then I'm going to find out, now that I know that I have a part that is being amortized, I need to know how many parts or how many pieces have been shipped. So using process of elimination and Postman, just like Jennifer and David have done earlier today, I went looking for a data source that would give me by date range what parts that we have shipped. So I found this data source 17131, and it gave me in summary, I didn't want details, I just needed to know how many. It gave me in detail how many parts were shipped. And then looping through those records, I could see what my quantities were, and used a comparison to compare my amortization quantity that was in my custom field to the summarized quantity in that date range of what was shipped. If it met that criteria, gathering up those pieces, I then compared the quantity, and if the quantity was over that the quantity that we had agreed upon, then I'm sending just an email to the cost person to have sales then notify the customer of what it is that we renegotiate the price, or just reduce the price, the piece price, taking out the amortized values. So this screen here is showing how I used replace text, like David was showing us, to populate the part number, populate the quantity that we had shipped, and populate what the amortized or the agreed quantity was, just as information to send to the cost accountant. And yes, it does send an email for every single part number. I think that they are looking at possibly being able to create a list and sending the list so that you don't get pounded with emails just as notifications. Once you've tested your process flow in the test environment, you're going to want to export it and import it into your live environment. But second to that would be then to schedule your process flow. We only need this flow to run once a month. We only check it once a month. We don't have that many amortized tools. So it seems to work out okay for us. You can always adjust the flow to run, more frequently if that's something that you need. So as you add the schedule, there's a lot of options to be able to select how often you want it to run. So what you would do is fill out your process flow with the name. The flow account is what your process flow account was named. We only have one, so it populates pretty quickly in there. I'm repeating this one time a month, and it runs on the first day of the month, and then gives the comparison of how many shipments happened in that date range from the time that the part went into amortization until the current date. It's pretty simple. Make sure you put some notes in here as to why and when you want those to run. Then is also part of the schedule, you need to give the process flow data sources permission to be able to be run on this account. So make sure that you check the grant data sources on your process flow and making sure that your process flow has those accesses. And these are the two data sources that this particular flow uses. And then this is an email. I just went to the email notification or the emails sent, I guess, and pulled open one that had gone. And as you can see, the part number is up in the subject line, and it also repeats in the body of the email, as well as how many pieces we've shipped. And it also shows the amortization quantity. So you can see here that the quantity has been met, and that's the reason why the email was sent to begin with. One thing to note, I think there was a question early on about formatting strings or concatenating things. Another piece of this puzzle that is not as user-friendly is these are numeric numbers, and you can see there's no commas or any way of making this a little more read-friendly. Hopefully that is to come in the future, or somebody can find a way of doing that, but these are actual numbers just pasted in and substringed together using the substitution. So, told you this was going to be quick. Are there any questions?
I do have a crazy idea for your comma issue.
Oh,
Well, I
good.
don't. I actually don't know. If I don't know how great it would be, but you could potentially replace 3 groups of 0 with a comma and 3 zeros. I don't know how that would look if you have more characters out.
Right. I did wipe out the decimal places. There are 5 decimal places in that field that gets returned with the summary of quantity. So I did wipe them out and substitute those with spaces so that you didn't see even the larger number on there. But yeah, it's just clunky so far. But it gets the message across, they can go then and investigate on their own. It's just, giving them an idea of how many pieces we have.
Have you thought about, I guess, another thing you could do? Have you thought about like sending them a direct URL link to the record to go look at? I don't know if there's an accounting job or something like that you can send.
Would that link be UX or is it going to conform to our classic?
Ooh,
You know how
that's a good-
workflow links are, it will
Yeah.
send you to classic?
Yeah, you'd have to, I guess this
Have
would
to
only
build
work
it.
in UX as you'd want to build out the URL path to go to the screen and the key of the record.
Mhm.
I don't think it would work in UX or classic because you have to have that like that session token in the URL name, and favorites don't work obviously in classic.
Right. Final tips and takeaways. As was mentioned previously, use Postman or SQL to know what your data is that you're getting. Be sure to grant your access to those data sources. The flow cannot run if it doesn't have access. Schedule it when you need it to run. Currently, we don't have trigger points. I know that they've been discussed and people are doing some beta testing on those, and I'm kind of anxiously awaiting, but this particular notification works just fine. Build it in test, save it frequently, export it daily. And I only import it into production when I've got it pretty fine tuned. I just keep it out of Plex until then. So just some tips. And there's my information. So if you have any other questions or anything that I can help you with, here's my info.
Thank you, Tammy. Okay.
And with that, I will give it back to you.
Thank you. Okay, the next session here is, I call it like an arts and crafts project. This goes over a real scenario that one of our customers had with transforming their data for adding cell operations into their routings, moving bill of materials around. If you have any parts in production, you know the pain that comes with adjusting parts that are in production that you're currently running production on, you currently have material for. This goes over a real world use case of kind of solving that pain there. I'm David. All right, so kind of pragmatically, like to do a data migration. Again, one of our customers wanted to put cell operations into their process routings. Again, one of the main challenges of what they had was they didn't just want to do this one time. They want to have this into production, or not production, but test often, like as in like every day, to make sure that their accounting, their production scheduling, maintenance, and quality can go in and view this data and then the transformed result without this becoming a full part-time job to do those daily updates across many part numbers, many produced serial numbers. So really the criteria for success was something that's repeatable. You can do it very, very quickly. Hopefully in the duration of a couple sips of a cup of coffee before the coffee cools down in terms of timing, which is pretty quick. In this, I'm not talking about like a Yeti cup and like an old ceramic coffee cup where it'll be cold in 10 minutes. So to plan this path for like the migration of this data, right? You have to add the process routing steps. You obviously need to add the bill of material items to the new process routing steps, adding the work centers to the routing steps, also deactivating operations you're no longer wanting to use, removing bill material items from inactive operations, and the hardest part of all this, and then this kind of goes along with like prep for like pushing this into production outside of test, is moving inventory to a new operation, right? When you modify a process routing in Plex, inventory sometimes gets abandoned at a previous operation. Maybe you've turned a operation from a cell, or sorry, production point to a cell operation, and that inventory does not automatically update to be that new operation. And rightfully so, because Plex has no idea of what you just did to the process routing structure, what bill material components are even in that container. And really just gets orphaned out there where you can't really do anything with that container unless you manually intervene and either to do some type of a, let's say if you added bill material components and this is now a cell operation, right? That would require you to set up a special job bomb, add the additional bill material components, record production, and bring them up to the completion percentage that reflects the current routing. Or in this case, this was a fully assembled product and all of the bill material components to it, and it was going from an operation 10 to, I believe, an operation 50 with the bill material components split across the different cell operations to better track cost and scrap. So it's right for automating the movement of that inventory, specifically to accommodate testing and test. And then the more important thing, well, is when you go do this in production, you don't want this to take a long time because you will want to have the work centers and jobs for this old version of the routing canceled, unloaded from the work center, the updates get in, new jobs created quickly. And you don't really want to have a career out of it on that day of doing those updates. So it's, I can't overemphasize how much work goes into updating production parts when you have inventory and you're trying to not like shut your floor down from producing in Plex and try to limit that overall time where you actually have to do this transition. Okay, so the first steps of this, as really steps 1, 2, and 3, was transforming that data with Data Magic. Data Magic is a web service tool that allows you to take any data source that exists in Plex and convert that data source into what looks like an Excel upload file that looks pretty similar to an upload file in Plex. Populate that data and then send those updates to Plex without having to program, and just converts it automatically to those web service credentials. Web service, what the web service expects. So the work that went into this here, right, the file was added to have new operations added into here with the operation add update. We had the approved work center added, and also those new bill material items added to those new operations. I'm just going to show you just a quick demo of that here on one part. So in Data Magic itself, I select routines here, And oops, Revolution group. We'll pick our full part upload. I'm gonna push this into test here. And I'm just gonna show you what that looks like for adding parts here. We have 1,058 records here, which if you know, like Plus uploads, 1,058 is a big no-no because it's max 1,000 records. I can add my routing add update here, which I've only got 3 here. I don't have the Proof Work Center turned on for this here. And then I'm gonna do my bill of material add here as well, which I've only got 3. If I open up one of these template files here, I just want to show you what this kind of looks like here. This is the same data source that Jennifer McIntosh was showing us earlier, this part and attributes add update. Okay. The upload file itself that gets generated takes all of the fields from that data source, from the data source registration, and then just converts it to an upload file that you can obviously put your data in here that you want to push into Plex quickly and with no like row limit restriction for pushing this data in. And if columns are nullable, it allows you to delete out columns. Like I can delete this out, and the data magic just automatically handles that column being missing if it's nullable. If it's not, and you did that, the data source will definitely return an error saying, hey, I'm expecting this column to be here and it's missing. It'll certainly return that value there. Like I said, this template or upload function works for any data source in Plex that has a data source registration from the data sources screen. And then this upload file matches that exact data source here. So I'm going to go to my Excel here, let's save. I've already got this upload file here set. I'm going to send these into production here, or it's not production, test. You can see it's processing one record at a time here. It's each record it's sending is a web service call, just like process flows is a web service instance that gets recorded against your monthly quota. While this is running here, like the routine that I selected here, it's a pretty powerful routine system that allows you to either have pre-set up routines to run uploads in order and basically set it up, hit send, walk away, and you come back and it's going to be done. There's also the ability in routines to pull back. I guess for each of these records here, they're pulling back data from Plex from those web service calls. In this instance, it's returning part keys. We've got the ability to create dynamic records or to add additional columns in your other upload files that could be wanting to use part keys that are newly created, not in your file, but to have your upload files kind of dynamically create themselves, at least some of the columns. You can set like which values you want to be able to map to be able to have those additional values injected into your other upload files. I'm gonna pick one of these simple ones here, this download results here for the routing ad update here. And then the result that comes back from Data Magic shows you, say, the row that you sent, all of the input values that we sent it, which it looks like I sent it just the the upload file. And it was really unhappy with me just sending the upload file. So I grabbed the wrong file here, but I think you get the point. We can see here that, well, it wasn't happy. Here's errors that came back from the data source column here for that. Exactly what went wrong, as well as it tells me the exact transaction number of what this happened. Let me show you one that was successful here. Okay, here's a better one here. This is our part ad updates. We see here, these are the parts that we sent into Plex here with the update. Again, here's all the values that we sent into the data source. And then everything else out here are results that came back in from that data source call. Again, this one returns part keys when you create new part keys or update part keys, as well as if we wanted to dig into this transaction inside of Plex, it does return us that transaction number so that we can see that and view it. Specifically, if we get an error result on there, if we wanted to investigate, well, what happened with that specific data source, we would see the exact transaction in Plex, as well as if there was any errors returned as part of that, it would show us those errors that were related to that web service call in the results here. Okay. So Data Magic did a lot of the heavy lifting for like transforming this data. But if we go back here to the other piece, well, Data Magic may not be the best tool for this job here of completely doing this next step here. So steps 1, 2, and 3 are very user-specific entry that there's no amount of logic that we can put in the process flow to figure this out. This is purely coming from input into the Excel files for the uploads with Data Magic. And then these other ones here, I mean, this 4, 5, and 6, this where it tilts from, well, the best tool for this job is really process flows, as we can have a set of rules here where we can find, well, which operations should we deactivate, which bill of material items should we remove from those inactive operations, and also, well, what inventory do we have for those operations that were inactivated that we need to move. And this is a very, like I call it like a happy example, as there's no complexity with the bill of material content of it changing. It's just purely expanding out that routing and bill of material structure to be having cell operations from a one production point to still a one production point at the end, but it has that additional cell operations for better scrap tracking and costing. Okay. So what's kind of left for us here is really addressing these challenges of what's left over from adding the parts, operations, bombs, and work centers. So this is not a good candidate for necessarily Data Magic for this. I mean, you could do it technically with some of the calls. You could feed dynamic templates with Data Magic, but it wouldn't be the easiest thing in the world to do. And then if you were to add these files into test and query the results so you can then target them, well, that works for that day. But the next day, when you upload these values into Plex, well, all of the database keys are going to be completely different than what you had for today's run. as you're going to have different part operation keys on that database for that record. Even if your facility didn't add any new operations, you could have a new part operation key that was different from today's run to yesterday's run. So we've really got to get this data fresh every day. Again, with being quick without making a career of it. And then if we're in the test environment, I mean, you could have done this with a query, right? To pull that new data, right? If you run a SQL query in test, it returns live data in test as there is no report server in test, which that would work in test if you did that for testing it. But the problem comes with using that as well. When we go into production, well, waiting 4 hours to do your inventory updates or to do the rest of your transformation really stinks. And you're going to be already trying to squeeze this in to where your floor either has a break or you have a shutdown. And if you're on a shutdown, right, that might be a holiday. You don't want to be spending more than a couple minutes on like a Thanksgiving or something like that to do these updates and changes if you can avoid it. Okay, so the process flow I'm going to take you through, it is going to dynamically go out and grab all that data that we need to go out and update. So I've got this set where we're going to go through and we're going to look at a very specific operation key here. We had a list of operations that really every instance of that operation, we're going to split that out into having cell operations and then replace it with a new operation at the very end. So we're looking at this part operations get v2, and we're looking at inactive part operations for active parts for the specific operation key of that 409.88. Okay. That's going to return us a list of part operations that are inactive. We go through that loop here, and we're going and basically returning that list of operations that came back. And then we're also getting this part operations get v2, and we're filtering it here on active part operations because we want to see what currently exists out there for active parts. And then for the new, really the production part operation type. So we want to find, well, what is that new part operation type that had a production type on it, or production op type on it from a cell operation type. So really from there, we're checking, okay, is there anything that has a new production operation type? If there is not, then we're going to the next part to check, or the next operation list to check, because it is null or empty. But if it's not a null or empty, and we do get result sets for it, we're going to look at the first item of the record, which there is should only be one item of the record, which we're very specifically looking at the one part here with the part key, so it should only be one record in our instance. So whenever we use this first object here, it allows us, instead of using a loop to process a list, if we know there's only going to be one result, well, let's pick one result here. I sorted that list that came back from this operation call by the operation number. I wanted to find the highest operation number. In the case that there was more than one operation in the history of this part, I wanted to pick the latest one in the operation. Okay, so that from that first item there, we're eventually going to do something with it. Okay, but first, well, part of our adjustment here is we need to clean up inactive, or not inactive, we need to clean up orphaned, it's probably more accurate, orphaned inventory containers for that specific operation that we inactivated. So we're looking at containers that are active for that specific operation, for that specific part, and we're going to be processing through a list of those serial numbers. Okay. So based on this search here and selecting the first record that came back from that list, we have the new part operation key that those containers need to be moved to. So this loop here, we're going through every serial number for that part number, and we are assigning it the new part operation key. We're also putting it into the last action of moved to the new part operation, and then we're going on to the next loop. So this flow very quickly finds all of the inventory that would have been orphaned by our updates into the process routing, updates them to the correct operation, and we're doing that inventory correction first as part of our cleanup, just to get the inventory fixed before we do anything else. As if you know the inventory is orphaned at a cell operation, you will not be able to use it in shipping or at a control panel for a work center. It's try to correct that as soon as humanly possible by having that first. Okay. Here is our first loop here. If you remember to me talking through the basics here, this was I believe that was an end of the loop, and then there was an each. So I chained this so that we would have a second loop that processes when the first loop is done. Okay, so off this first loop, we have the second loop here. The second loop is going through all of our operations. It pulled that part operation key, and it's getting its bill material items from that operation that we would have inactivated. And it's saying, well, do I have any bill material items in here that are active for that specific part operation key? Well, if we do have records that are active for that, well, we probably should clean those up. Just one of my habits here, I love to have, and it makes your flows a little dirty looking, but I love to have every field visible in my process flow. And that's a lot of tab space, tab space, tab space to turn it all on. But when you're doing something complex and it's a really long flow, I find it takes less time, and it's better to keep the like the problem and where you're currently at in your head when you have all of the data visible of what you possibly could use and pull into that, without needing to break your thought process and going back, well, do I have this data in here or not? So by having that exposed, sure, the process flow looks a little dirty because it has all these fields on it that we don't use. But from a solving the problem perspective, it's very, very efficient to go through, have all of visible for you to pull and use. And then if you want to, you could go back in and just uncheck the fields that you didn't use if you wanted to clean that up. Okay. So again, this is the bill material item here. The BOM update data source that I used for this, which we are just inactivating the bill material item on that, is a little hairy in terms of what it wants. It wants to have a lot of information to be able to do that BOM update. I wish there was another data source that allowed us to just push the BOM key and say it was inactive. For my research, I couldn't find one. So what I did was, well, I looked up the bill material for the operation. We had the exact BOM key, and I'm copying all the values that are relevant for this update right into the next update statement. So it takes that data from my loop, connects that into my update statement, where I'm pulling those current values into there. And then I am inactivating the bill of material for that step. And then we're moving on to the next part that was inactivated there. This type of thing is probably the most difficult operation you're going to do in process flows, is when you have a data source that is expecting the world from you in terms of input. My strong recommendation for you guys is to do this. Pull this, like this BOM update, into your Playground process flow, or bring it into Postman and exactly find out what field values are required for this data source. I mean, it'll, in this one, return a bunch of keys saying, hey, this wasn't present, this is required. If you notice here, I didn't really have any reds except for maybe the BOM key on here. So it was trial and error to figure out what was actually required for this BOM update. And it is far easier to do that in like a Playground flow or Postman, where you don't have to worry about all this other stuff that goes along with the process flow or fully integrating it into the flow before you even know if it works or not. Okay. And that was pretty much the arts and crafts kind of show there, where we took some very manual data manipulation, which historically you probably would have had to done this by hand. We automated a lot of the updates, first half with Data Magic, the second half with process flows. And we're very quickly able to update this data without having to manually record something. And then it passes that, like, is your cup of coffee still warm, or your can of cola or soda, whatever you call your pop. And it takes like very, very little time to do that. And so that's certainly a goal, especially when you have your plant operations that could be waiting for you to do this update, or worst case example, at least from like the personal aspect, is you're taking time out on a morning of a holiday when you have a plant shut down to do this. Okay, what questions do you guys have for me for like any of this process here that we went through? The silent bunch today.
I'm back though, so it won't be silent too much longer.
Alrighty. This leads us into our next. Looks like we're going to finish probably an hour up early today. Community Q&A. We're going to go through, like I said, the Q&A session. We're going to go through some recent news in the Plex space and like review that together and just talk about like what that news means for you guys, as well as the community Q&A for you. It's really your time to ask a specific question to the community of, well, how is the best way you solve this problem? Or have you guys ran into X? Really kind of that mentoring space here for the community. Okay. The notable news that impacts, better log in here. Okay, the notable news that have come out recently is a change to APIs and web service access and key management. Okay. So part of this update, let's break this down a little bit, is this step here. One, there is an update to like how web services are tallied. This is an effort from Plex to standardize quota and tracking more accurately and standardized. It's been kind of a little wild west of there's been multiple different ways to track it, and they are standardizing monthly quota to be able to better track that reliably and consistently throughout the rest of the platform. Okay. The other thing that I'm excited about, and admittedly it's going to cause us a little pain with it, but it is this HTTP 429 2-meter requests. Now, what this means is that if you really hammer on Plex with web services, and the exact number per second escapes me, I don't know, I'll let you guys know, like post the user group. But if you exceed like the speed limit for web service calls, it'll return back to you a 429 2-meter request, and then it'll have in the header retry after. Now, on paper, it's like, okay, why are you excited about a speed limit, David? Well, when I was working directly for a plant, I was on one of the plants I was working for was on one of the database end servers that they previously split out due to performance. And what really impacted us for performance was on random days when folks had a brand new integration that they were spinning up and just really pounded the database and made our Plex instance crawl or become unresponsive. Generally, that was solved with CloudOps, where they would put the kibosh on that by either disabling the credential or just otherwise shutting it down so they could bring platform stability back. And this automates that. And I can tell you in most instances, if you're using good practices for integrations, you should never run into this 2-meter requests. This is really just to prevent there to be some accidental abuse, which if you know of the term noisy neighbor in like a multi-tenant environment, it just overall reduces the impact of that noisy neighbor from having a shared like database. But it's a really, really good thing for the long-term stability of the platform. Like really good. Okay. Any questions around that? I don't have any more data for like this piece here for the monthly quota than what was shared in the post. Any questions around like the 429 2-meter requests? The next bit of news on here was currently through the developer portal, you create your access keys through the developer portal by creating a new application, choosing which applications it has access to. This is moving to the IAM portal to be in line with how you currently request any Plex access, whether it's a Plex user account or an ODBC key. It's just moving into that standardized platform, which gets considered as like neutral news. It's great to see them consolidating on a standardized method to have all access into things in one spot versus having it scattered. Okay. And that's all I have for the notable news there. Well, let's begin our community roundtable section of the user group. Who wants to go first for a question, maybe a mentoring opportunity? Just raise your hand and we'll go in the order of the hand raised in the meeting here. All right, looks like Heidi is up first here.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to share something because I asked if it was going to be added as a known issue to Plex, and they're not adding it. I added it as a question on the community the other day, and I am not sure if anybody is aware. Plex was able to duplicate my issue on their side in the PCN, but if you have, and I think it's related to daylight savings, so if you don't do daylight savings, maybe if you're in a different time zone, it might not be an issue. But if you have time off buckets, I'm in Central Time Zone, everything is offset by a day. And David, if you want to give me an access to share, I can kind of show you what I'm talking about.
Yep. There you go.
Okay. Share. Okay. So if you look here, you can see that we ended up adding, because we're closed for Christmas week and some people didn't have unpaid time off. So we added unpaid time off for everybody. And we wanted to add it from the 22nd to the 28th of December. When I did that, it offset everything by a day. So then I went in and added it from the 21st to the 27th. And let me move this out of the way here. Where is it? Then when I go into add, I've got time off already, but as you can see, because it's only good for that week, I can still take a day off on the 28th for that time bucket. Even though I'm not supposed to be able to. It should only be from the 20, but it allows me from the 22nd to the 28th, which is what I want, even though the bucket is only from the 21st to the 27th. It's allowing me to take days from the 22nd to the 28th only. So just wanted to share that. I have a case out there. I'm assuming it has to do with daylight savings, and it's also messing with existing time off. My vacation expires on January 16th of 2020 because that's my anniversary date. And if I had vacation left, it would allow me to take it until the 17th. So it's extending everybody's vacation day by one day, but it's not letting them take vacation on their first day of vacation. So just wanted to pass that along to everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
And just to follow up with Heidi, I did some testing for her. I'm in Eastern time zone and I do not see any of this impact.
Yep. Plex tested it in their PCN and they were seeing it. They weren't seeing it on the start date. They were seeing it on the end date.
Yeah, keep us up. Yeah, keep us up to date on that. That's a certainly a new emerging issue for
Right, and
folks that are not in the Eastern time zone.
Right. I just thought it was bizarre that I was like, well, that's interesting. And it didn't happen 2 weeks ago because we entered bereavement for somebody and it entered for the correct dates. So my guess it has something to do with daylight savings that happened this past weekend.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that core code is assuming the current date and time, and the current date and time, at least historically, the Plexus servers were in Eastern.
Right. And there was
versus
an
like
issue with
UTC.
some other things with daylight savings that they fixed a few months ago. So maybe they have to undo whatever it is that they fixed due to daylight savings. I'm unsure. But there were some other daylight savings issues that they fixed-ish a while back.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Alrighty, Andrew. Andrew Kohler.
Andrew, your mic's doing that thing again. Just a cover for him. Don't get a Razer headset. Sometimes it just spreads out on you.
While we're waiting, does anyone have a favorite headset brand?
Mine is actually Razer, but
I have
not
I
for
have two.
teams.
I have two. And the ones I'm wearing right now are like Bose, but they're the ones that actually go over your whole head and have like, they're not just earbuds. But then I have the Jabra Elite earbuds. So these are good, like, because they're noise canceling and I can seriously like not hear anything. But they're just kind of bulky. But my Jabras are good too. They have the noise cancellation and stuff like that. But the battery went dead because I was using them all morning, so I had to switch to the Bros headset. But I like them both. They're both very nice. One reason I like the over the head ones versus my earbuds, because people can very clearly see that I'm on using my headset. Where with my earbuds, they're like the color of my skin. So people will just come up and start talking to me and I'm on a webinar or something.
Yeah, I love the over the ear or over the head for sure. Only thing I don't like about the overhead is like it gives you like the hair bump.
It messes my hair. Yeah, I know. Like wearing a
Experience
headband.
like the Jabra, Planetronics, Logitech are all pretty good. Work really well with teams generally.
Nice.
Definitely the headset you're using this morning when the mic quality was a little bit better in terms of quality.
And this one?
Yeah, that one sounds
good.
like it's more almost like cell phony, like maybe speakerphone type of quality.
Well,
Not terrible,
because
but
the other one, the earlier ones were my Jabra earbuds, so that's good feedback. Thank you.
are you ready, Andrew?
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Yes.
Okay, cool. I just switched headsets. Okay,
Well, then
I
you're ready to
didn't
answer
really-
the question. What's your favorite headset?
oh, well, it was the Razer headset, but the microphone just loves to turn off for some reason. Or not work. I didn't have a question about process flows, but more about the IAM APIs.
Yeah.
I was wondering what their intended use was.
Yeah, good question. I can speak of our usage of them. We use them in our ADP integrations we do for folks. We have them create new users, terminate access, provide PCN access. There are some gotchas with the IAM you should be aware of. Is that if you try to push in a username twice, it doesn't complain that it already exists. It brings it back numbered. Like if you say J Doe and John Doe already exists for a username, you would say John Doe 1. And then that was probably the biggest pain we had to deal with. And then there is no test environment for IAM. So when you're testing live.
Okay. Is there any documentation on what the application roles or any of the settings for those applications are? Like in accounts.plex.com?
Yeah, let me see if I can find that for you.
Actually, there's a pretty good document on that in the documentation coming from
Yeah.
Plex, which is kind of remarkable.
Yeah, I just posted a link to the chat here. It's the IAM fundamentals. Takes you through all that pretty good detail. There's also another gotcha. Sometimes with the IAM, there is a delay in Plex user account creation. So it'll create the user account as like a background job. So if you create a whole bunch of IAM accounts, depending on how busy the IAM system is at the time, it could take up 5 minutes for that user account to get created. So as you do an integration to that, you definitely want to check before you just start sending stuff to Plex. Do a check. Hey, has this user account been created or not yet? It's like the first thing you do a call into Plex and get is the user account. Just check to make sure it's there, and then just back off. I guess it's safe to back off 5 minutes and to check again for that user account.
Gotcha. Okay, I guess I missed all of this stuff in the documentation. I didn't see any of this.
Yeah, it's I guess the navigation, I have a hard time with the navigation and the documentation here, which is admittedly hard to find. I usually find if I know the exact word, the search is really good. I think Blake also is having a webinar here next week or so. They're going to be bringing an LLM into the community and the documentation. So you'll be able to ask like the LLMs, like, hey, how do I do X? And it's going to search the user posts, the documentation, and give you its best LLM try of answering your question.
I think the AI was launched
Yeah,
on
that's-
Monday, wasn't it?
Yes, it's live.
Yeah,
They
it's
launched
pretty
it on
awesome.
Saturday.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Works great.
Awesome. You want to show us an example of that, Jennifer, if we've not all seen it yet?
Sure. So if I go over to the community, I did this one earlier today. I just typed in deserialization. And usually you have to comb through a ton of documents, but it generates this here prior to going through all of this stuff. That's how I've used it so far. I haven't like asked it anything specific, but it does a generated answer before it would just go straight to all this stuff, and you're like, what? And you would have to like say, well, I want to see what's in the community. So then it switches all these little types.
That's cool.
or if I want documentation. But
Mm.
now it just gives you kind of a, and I'm sure I
Summary.
could ask it, show me documents for this, but it does give you just a high level generated answer right off the get-go.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that too, Jennifer, just stay there for a minute. I used to put in keywords in the search at the top. And like you said, you get a whole list of documents that have those keywords in it. I found that with this AI, if you ask it a question or what you're really looking for, it really does a pretty good job narrowing it down and summarizing your answer. So if you give it a little bit more information, it really tries its best to give you the exact thing that you're looking for.
Well, we're gonna test it.
And then that little, now that you show that piece of it, see the little eye to the right? Instead, we used to click on the hyperlink of program management, but that's not there anymore. That's what the little eye is on the side. And I've been seeing a couple of comments in the community. How come I can't open this PDF? You know, the old searches, why can't I see that? And that's what that eye is for you to be able to open from there.
Sadly, today at least, you can't actually see any images in those PDFs and you can't download them.
Oh,
So
shoot.
Yeah.
so they're super broken right now. But
Gotcha.
there is an eyeball to push. So that's
There
cool.
is an eyeball, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, we have found detailed questions really don't get too much. And for obscure stuff, you don't get stuff real fast.
Okay.
But for really short things, you will sometimes get an AI thing. Sometimes it's related, sometimes it's not to what, but yeah, I think they're working on it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna ask it a question. What's a good recipe for an apple pie? Oh, it doesn't return it. Shoot.
Process control recipes.
Here we go.
So, and I think it just like any other AI, it's gonna learn and get better, right?
Mm-hmm. Or we're gonna learn how to ask the proper question.
Right.
Yeah, there is like a thumbs up and thumbs down. So I've definitely been like thumbs downing some responses that I'm getting.
Good.
Just to teach it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's important too. When you get a good answer, make sure you flag it as such. And
I was just gonna pull that back up. Yeah, right here.
Hmm.
And can you leave feedback? Yeah, that's great. Good stuff.
I like the question of if it was hallucinated or not.
Now, don't get it all confused and messed up before we even get it smart.
Mhm. Yeah, that can be a dangerous combo.
Yeah, thank you for showing that, Jennifer. That's real
Yep,
cool.
no problem. You're welcome.
All right, Amy.
Yeah, we just found we've been chasing our tails on this and just wanted to share this with other people. If you're using IntelliPlex and you're using extracts, as Manu has been showing the last couple of weeks, we found a weird bug and support has verified this. If you create your extract and you ever once write your extract to your My Content folder, even if you change the location of that My Content of that extract elsewhere, nobody else will ever be able to get access to that file. So putting a file into your My Content folder only gives access to the owner and to their incarnation. So not even like them in another PCN. So like them in the PCN that they happen to be in at that time. Even if you ask your report to put that extract somewhere else later, you will never get access. Nobody else will ever be able to see that file. So just wanted to share that because it drove us insane for quite some time.
Almost sounds like my content just shouldn't be used.
I have asked for ours to just be turned off.
Yeah, exactly.
It has caused so many problems. It is such a nightmare in there. But they haven't turned it off yet.
Yeah, that's the other thing we're having issues too. Like we found, I don't know if everyone else has the same experience, but we're having issues with reliably combining Excel documents and Plex data, like maybe adding some additional, like manually calculated KPIs and joining it. We're finding the experience pretty buggy.
Yeah, we have some things that flat don't work. And so maybe we can compare notes at some point. Andrew, I guess maybe we should post all the things we've learned.
That'd be awesome.
And everybody
Yeah.
and everybody can contribute. Yeah, because we're trying to do the exact same thing, David.
We have it working, but then as soon as you touch it, it blows up like the next time.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And it's slow as anything, but Manu did point out that if you, just as a quick tip, and you probably already figured this out, David, but if you do your combination and push it to an extract and then create another report that uses that extract, you're good to go. You can't create the extract and then use it immediately like you can with other reports if it has those two different kinds of data sources. So anyway, we'll spell all that out. But
yeah, there's also, if you're not on it, there is an IntelliPlex office hours today.
Yeah.
Great to get our 99 grievances and nailed up on the door. With love, I should say. Man, he's a great guy.
Oh yeah, we love him. We're not dissing him. He's got a big thing to handle.
Yeah, us.
Exactly. Does anybody have a way to remind Plex to renew their certs regularly? Is that a
What do you mean?
thing
which
we can?
certs?
Are you talking about the outage that happened 2 days ago?
Yeah, and a couple months ago.
Yeah, it seems to be more often than in the past.
Yep.
Suppose we could. That'd be a good process flow.
Yeah.
So David, I know you in this roundtable, or maybe it was in one of your slides, you're like use case, what would be a good use case for the process
Yeah.
flows? I had a ticket come in. I'm going to read it to you in just a second when I can find it, that I thought might be a good. Here it is. I don't know if this would be or not, but they want to explore the possibility of when they identify a quality issue for a particular serial number, we automatically, like when you put that container on hold, it goes into hold. Not a big deal. That's normal out of the box Plex functionality. But what they would like to do is when that container goes on hold, we want to also put the two containers that were built immediately prior to that serial number and the two containers built immediately after that serial number on hold also.
That is a super good use case.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. Because it's definitely not out of the box Plex that I know.
Yeah. Let me. That's kind of weird
Build
to show
that up
you guys,
real
but
quick and send it to me. Just kidding.
I'll enter safe harbor. Like I'm gonna show you guys some LA stuff.
Okay.
It's related to the actions around this. Like I would wait to solve this until this is released in general availability, because this is like a perfect use case for this.
Okay.
Like,
okay. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay. I'm
Okay.
listening.
Oops.
You got my
I don't need
attention.
that many tabs. Maybe
Yes.
there we go. Yeah, that's the wrong screen. Hold on. I've only got 3 monitors.
Mhm.
All right, so I'm gonna do new flow here. So I mentioned here, like right now we have a start little node here. The start node, we don't really want it. Up until this point, doing what I'm gonna do here, that's pretty sacrilegious to delete your start node because you have to have one.
Okay.
Well, the new thing in LA is this action trigger. Okay.
So container on
So-
hold.
Yeah. So container change. So we're going to do this and we're going to say a container action trigger. We've edited the container.
Mhm.
Okay. Drag this out. There's our fields. Here's the serial number. And then we'd want to do something like, this. We would get for sure container get, hopefully. Container get serial. This will return you back this is like the first list item I was talking about. Mine list item. You're only going to have one container come back on this, so why use a loop? And then you better look like here and say, okay, well, what's the container status here? Drag off my comment here. We're going to check if this is equal to hold, which I'm going to come back and I'm going fast here, but come back and show you. Hold. And then, so our container comes back and it's on hold. Then we want to do something. If it's not on hold, then just stop. But if it is, do something here. And then you'd go and like you'd obviously find its downstream trace of the container, and that's the keyword, is the downstream,
Mhm.
and find the things and update them.
Put those on hold, and then I can do like a +2, right? Because they don't just want the 2 containers prior and the 2 containers after.
Yeah, that's where you'd want to be. It'd be 2 different data source calls. It would be one on this, let's go get the containers after.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want to do the containers prior, it'd be another like setup one where you go back or forward.
loop?
However many.
Would that be
You
a
do
loop?
probably 2 different loops.
Okay.
You do one to look at the next containers and then one to look at the before containers.
Okay.
But
What's the timing on the rollout for these new features?
it's supposed to be by the end of this month, this one.
Okay. So by the end of this year, maybe January, February.
Yeah, I would definitely approach it there, and then custom fields or custom objects are supposed to be out here pretty soon too.
Okay.
But this is the perfect use case. It doesn't happen immediate. I'll just say that. So if you're looking to test it, it doesn't happen immediately. It happens within a minute or 2. So if you're looking, where the heck is this change event? Well, it'll happen within a couple minutes.
Okay.
I know that was the first time I tested this. I was confused, lost in the woods, and then eventually it happened.
Then you saw the forest through the trees finally.
Yeah, some came with a flashlight, an old yeller. Would that be Lassie technically? Because Old Yeller's the one that got rabies.
No, that was Cujo.
No,
Did Old Yeller get
Old Yeller got
rabies
rabies
too?
and they had to put him out at the end of the movie.
Oh,
was
no
Lassie that
wonder I
always
don't
rescued
like
Timmy in
Old
the well.
Yeller. Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, like
No
this is
wonder I
the
watched it once.
perfect use case of the actions.
Nice.
And then
I'm
there
glad I
are
asked.
tons of action triggers here. I will just say this, like not every event that updates a container to the container status will trigger this. Okay. This specific action of edit container will trigger it. So where does edit container get triggered? From the container form. Okay. So any updates in the container form to update the container to hold will trigger it. If you do it with a web service or some other method, it will not trigger it. So just be aware of that. Those type of, I would call those platform or like system events, in Safe Harbor and all that mumbo jumbo. We're going to be starting to look at that this next year for how to do like platform and system generated events. So it doesn't matter where the thing came from, it'll trigger it. But it is a really good first blush for like event driven stuff in Plex. Good question.
Cool.
All right. Any other questions lingering out there? Okay. Well, I guess the next portion to talk about is we're going to be doing another developer user group meeting. Let me pull the schedule here. It was in December. Hold on. No, it can't be in December. I think it was in January. Put it to.
Yeah, I think we did January.
The schedule here for the topic.
And if we don't already, do we already have topics slated for that?
We do not.
Okay, I was just gonna suggest I did the data source 99, but we talked about, the other methods, the API, or I thought there was a second one. There was 3 total, but to cover those, I think might be helpful.
Mhm.
I know it'd be helpful for me because I want to learn
Okay.
those other methods.
So this will probably be relevant for Amy if she's still on, or Andrew. The next user group that we have scheduled is going to be centered around IntelliPlex. So I mean, I know today was primary process flows in January. It's like it's going to be the first full week back from the first. Again, heavily on IntelliPlex. If you have topics that you want covered, or you want to cover a topic, hopefully Andrew or Amy wants to do a topic over something you guys are doing some cool stuff with IntelliPlex. It'd be a
That'd be
really
interesting.
good time to share that out. And then February, I'm going to put a poll out in the community here for 2026 in terms of topics that we want the community to cover. I know this year was pretty heavy on the new Plex Extend. So we did VisionPlex in April. September, we had integration. Obviously, today was process flows, and IntelliPlex really rounds us out for this year's content. But please present, give ideas, and really all the content that we present, like I said, it comes from your direct feedback of what you want to see, what you want to show. And if you've not presented anything and you're nervous about it, we can partner you with someone to help you through making a presentation, fully fleshing out your example you want to show, to really give back to the Plex user group community.
For me personally, even though I come across as like an extrovert, I did not like presenting, especially in public, like PowerPlex or Automation Fair. And I present and volunteer on purpose because it helps me practice and get a little less nervous each time I do it. So that's another reason I like to do it personally, because I do get nervous and I do get uncomfortable.
Very much so outside my box. I agree with
Yeah.
you, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I hope the rest of you have a really good rest of your week. I did get some update on the September user group video. For some reason, it errored out on the upload and it fell off the back of the bus. It's uploading now into YouTube. I'll post that in the community along with this user group video in the community. Here should be both of those should like September should be here by the end of today, and then this one will be here hopefully by tomorrow.
Thank you, David. We appreciate your time and efforts on all of this.
You're very welcome. All right, everyone, hope you have a great rest of your days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care.